Buen dia. Welcome back to Single Black Man from Des Moines. My name is Al Simon Jr. A little about me. I was a dog handler in the service. I worked in retail, healthcare, and libraries. I have taught Hapkido for over 20 years. I am currently single and retired from marriage. Now I'm a fledgling writer. From time to time, I'll read some of my pieces, fiction and nonfiction, and time permitting, I might tell a joke that I've heard from the past. I like to keep these around 20 minutes, no more than 20 minutes. I'll post every week. It seems to be on Saturdays, so please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to purchase my works, I have some things at Smashwords, or you can email me at al_simon@hotmail.com, and I'll send you a complete list of all my stories. Usually the stories is going to be 5 and under, novels going to be right around 10. If you order from me to be a little bit cheaper, I go through PayPal. If you need more flexibility with payment options, then just go to Smashwords. Just be advised, all my stuff is not on Smashwords. That being said, let me tell you a story. This is a true story today. This is about my grandpa. Obviously, it's called Gramps. So let me get into it here. I didn't have many memories of my grandfather on my mother's side. My dad's father had long passed, so I never even knew what he looked like, nor my grandmother on his side. Mom told me that she doted on me and didn't care much for my younger sister. Mom once said whenever she heard my younger sister, Lynn, cry, she'd say, "Shut that tramp up." That, in a nutshell, tends to show the temperament I grew up with. For the most part of my life, I grew up in a 2-story home with an attic in Des Moines, Iowa. We weren't poor as far as I know, at least not then. It was much later, when I was in elementary school, that we fell into hard times. My parents divorced before I started 3rd grade. I remember Alfonso Crockett as a man of medium height who drove a wood-paneled station wagon. Whenever he showed up, he'd bring a haul from his hunting. I remember seeing pheasants, rabbits, and squirrels. Once, in a display of largesse, he bought the 3 of us kids bikes and pushed us around the block with training wheels attached. I'm not sure when he stopped coming over. I asked Mom about this, to which she said, "He doesn't like your father." I was too young to understand the family dynamics at this time. I do recall Mom and Dad once having a vicious argument that was so bad that she had to escape from the house and seek refuge at the Hawthorns, the neighbors next door. I stood in the alley as I watched the patrol car descend with my father inside. I was greatly relieved once I saw that he emerged from the patrol car at the end of the alley. This was the early 1960s. It's not inconceivable for an imposing black man to get some knots on his head from the police. Upon retrospect, I thought Dad must have been awfully persuasive to get let out unscathed. I will add, this is one of the few times that I've ever felt any emotion about my father, but that's another story. Once we were to be evicted, Mom and Dad were separated then. I remember we had moved all our belongings outside of the house. By day's end, Mom said Gramps had taken care of the bill and everything was moved back into the house. As I grew up with Mom, I saw her have many harsh arguments with her siblings. She had a sister that lived 2 houses down where they went several years without speaking. There was another brother in Philadelphia she had a feud with that lasted decades. So it was not inconceivable to believe that words had exchanged between her and Gramps. And as I grew up with her, all her brood suffered under her verbal wrath and physical wrath as well, but again, that's another story. Decades passed. I'm sure Gramps had a phone, as did we. Not once did I ever hear my mother call him. Out of sight, out of mind. I was 24 and married to a Korean national when I got out of the service. I decided to check on Gramps. He lived on the south side of Des Moines. Back then it was called the Bottoms. Most people had outhouses. I remember a well at the end of Scott Street where people could get water. Pipes from some pumps were common. This was 1979, and by this time, Gramps had indoor plumbing installed in his modest two-story home. It was a narrow house. City codes today would not allow a house that size to be built. When Gramps responded to the doorbell, I had to tell him who I was. Once he let me in, this began weekly visits of mine. Most of the time I went alone. A few times I went with my ex-wife-to-be. It didn't take long to ascertain that no one in his family ever came to see him. I was in the service when Mom told me that he had had a stroke and his housekeeper found him in his tub. The news had made the Associated Press. Even still, I'm not sure anyone came to check on him afterwards. Besides my immediate family, there was also a son of his, another daughter, a couple of sisters and cousins who lived in Des Moines. Excuse me. Go. Get out. Sorry about that. Not my dog. I won't say that he never said anything hateful to me. He did show some intractability and obstinacy. I admit that most of my family seemed to have this gene. One day I was sitting in his living room with him and his phone rang, repeatedly. With the phone on a table between us, I asked, "Gramps, you want me to get that?" Ain't no one I want to talk to. Another time his air conditioner went out. I made arrangements to have a repairman come over. I get a call the same day from the repairman who tells me that Gramps won't pay him. When I asked why, the repairman said that Gramps felt that he dawdled and didn't do an hour's worth of work. I called Gramps to ask him about this. I stood there and watched him the whole time. He didn't do an hour's work. I ain't paying him $75. He's trying to cheat an old man. When I offered to pay, he got cantankerous. I ain't paying him. And if it goes to small claims court, that's fine. If I'm wrong, then that's okay too. Don't you go paying my bill. And back then, you knew when you were hung up on. I saw him every weekend for about 2 years until he died. He bought Jezebel, that's my ex-wife-to-be. He bought Jezebel a dress. He lent me money for my gym. We talked about certain authors, mainly Frank Yerby. More times than not, we just watched television. I'd have a beer or some ice cream, and after an hour or so, I'd leave. Once he opened up and gave me a glimpse of what his life was like. He was talking to me about a brother of his who lived in Kansas. They had talks about going to Mexico and fish. Gramps had a boat he kept in his garage. He hunted, like I mentioned before, and had 2 rifles that I knew of. I remembered him bringing game to Mom before they had their falling out. I think the brother's name was Alfred. So Gramps drives to pick him up. Once he gets there again, and this is after an agreement to go, Alfred begs off and says he can't make the trip right then. Gramps says fine. He heads back to Des Moines, and then Gramps said, I never spoke to him again. As he spoke, I thought, I don't blame him. I've been burned by all my sibs, and it gets to a point where not only are you not being respected, but you're also being taken advantage of. For my own peace of mind, it was best to cut the cord and not have anything to do with my family. Again, that's another story. I won't say that this is a feather in my cap, but when he was admitted to General Hospital for a heart ailment, I was the only one he called. I was a manager of a store, and it took me some time to get to the hospital to see him. He had died before I got there. When he died, the consensus of everyone was that I take over his house. I eventually bought it and ended up losing the home. I had had an uninsured fire and never recovered. I heard it from Mom every weekend when I'd go over to see her. I took her barbs in stride until one day she said, "It's a shame what you did to my daddy's house." Talking back to my mom was never a good idea because you'd get a backhand to your head. It didn't stop me from thinking it's a shame you thought more of your daddy's house than you did me. And that ends the story of Gramps. Again, please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to purchase my works, I have some things over at Smashwords, or you can email me at al_simon@hotmail.com, or you can just buy me a cup of coffee. I'd appreciate that as well. What else do I got here? Okay, thanks for tuning in. Let's get Al out of the ghetto, and I'm going to close with this. You load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.